this is an important moment, a really important moment for President Trump's legislative agenda. So much of what he does with the stroke of a pen in hopes that it gets through the courts. This is different. This is really it when it comes to what he wants Congress to do. Actually, just hang on one second. Let's listen into the Senate. Lauren, I'm going to go back to you. We see on the screen there 50-50. This is what you suspected. Looking at this, at the chair there, yeah, it looks like it is the vice president. So we do expect a tie-breaking vote momentarily.
Yeah, our team who is in the chamber, Dana, they are giving us some live updates. And I just want to preface this with the fact that until it's gavelled, nothing is final. You can hear the vice president here. What we are learning from inside the chamber is that Senator Rand Paul has voted no. We know that Senator
Lauren,
Susan
hang on.
Collins.
Let's listen to the vice president.
The Senate will suspend for a prayer by the Senate chaplain.
Oh, never mind. Sorry, Lauren.
That's okay.
The prayer is important. It is part of the daily business of the Senate. But as we monitor that, please continue what you were telling us about the news.
Yeah, we know now that Senator Rand Paul voted no on this piece of legislation. Senator Thom Tillis voted no on this piece of legislation. Senator Susan Collins voted no on this piece of legislation. But our colleague Sarah Ferris, who was in the chamber, said that Senator Lisa Murkowski gave a quiet but affirmative vote for this legislation. Obviously, that is a significant development given the lengths that leadership went to try to win over her support. She had several concerns in this bill, from Medicaid to food stamps cuts in her state, and she was really successful in winning some major things for the state of Alaska, including the fact that a key provision that would have shifted some of the burden of covering the cost of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program known as food stamps back in her state, she was carved out. Alaska was carved out, as was Hawaii. That just shows you how far leadership was working to try to win up and shore up her vote.
And when you say carved out, just to be clear, it means that the cuts that are coming to most states will not come to the state of Alaska and Hawaii as well.
Exactly. Non-contiguous states in the United States will not be subject to that change. We'll see how that goes over among House conservatives once this gets back over to their chamber, of course.
Okay, and Lauren, I just want to show our viewers, as we wait to see the final gavel. As you said, we don't know for sure what happens until the final gavel, although this time I think we have a pretty good sense. I just want to show our viewers the big picture of what we're talking about here, the substance of this, because the horse trading and the politics are fascinating, but the substance is really ultimately what matters. We're talking about extending the 2017 tax cuts, overhaul eligibility for Medicaid and food stamps, no taxes on tips or overtime. That was a big campaign promise that President Trump was out there talking about, and then even Kamala Harris did as well. Phasing out green energy tax credits, money for the Pentagon, border security, detentions, and deportations, a lot of money there. And it also lifts the debt ceiling. Can we just talk a little bit about, as we look at all of the components to this, the no's weren't that many no's, considering the concerns that we heard from a lot of Republican senators about a lot of what's in this when it comes to the Medicaid reform or cuts, when it comes to the fact that the CBO says it adds like $3 trillion to the deficit. But at the end of the day, unless somebody changes their vote before it's finally gavelled, it was just, as you said, Rand Paul and Thom Tillis, who went out with a blaze of glory. He was so upset about this. He said, I'm not going to run for re-election.
Yeah, and Dana, I just want to interrupt to say they have gavelled this vote
Okay.
now. It happened very quickly, but I want to just point out, as you were saying, you have these 3 Republicans who voted against this bill, and one of them voting against it for very different reasons, right, than the other 2. Senator Thom Tillis, Senator Susan Collins, they had concerns about those Medicaid cuts. And we should note that in the very end of this bill, the negotiations led to a place where Susan Collins nearly doubled that rural hospital fund that she had been fighting for. Still, it was not enough to win her vote. Meanwhile, Senator Rand Paul voted against this bill because there was too much spending, he argued, and the fact that it increased the country's borrowing limit. That was something he did not want to include in this legislation, and he was very clear with leadership from the jump that that was going to be a red line for him. Obviously, they decided that they didn't need his vote, that they could get votes elsewhere, but that is why those 3 members voted against this legislation. We do expect that Senator Susan Collins will issue a more formal statement explaining her vote anytime. We should also note she is now, of those 3, the only Republican that we know of who is seeking re-election in the state of Maine. That obviously could have been Thom Tillis as well, but he announced on Sunday that he was not going to seek re-election after he faced massive backlash from the president when he voted against advancing this piece of legislation.
Really, really interesting. Lauren, thank you so much for being there. Thank you for making clear that this has officially passed. We did miss that quiet gavel by the vice president, who is the president of the Senate, who made sure that it passed by 1 vote, thanks to his tie-breaking vote. Let us know if you see and hear anything that is noteworthy as we learn what else happened on the floor. And my panel is back. Jeff Zeleny, I interrupted you as we got the news. The big picture here about the Trump agenda.
Look, it's an extraordinary piece of legislation, some 980 pages in the Senate. We should point out this is not done yet. However, it is getting to that point. There is momentum behind this bill now. President Trump obviously wants it. So, House conservatives now have a decision to make. Are they going to be the fiscal hawks that they've long talked about, or are they going to swallow hard and vote for this bill? My guess is that by the end of the week, there is a bill. Is it going to be a straight line to that point? No, it is not. But we cannot really underestimate how sweeping this legislation is. It reminds me of something as big as the Affordable Care Act that we all covered 15 years ago now. And the political consequences could also be similar. I've spent some time out in the country talking to voters and rural hospital providers and others, and they are really worried still about these Medicaid cuts. And here's just one reason why. It sort of sounds arcane, but someone with Medicaid now who relies on it to take care of a child with disabilities has to now apply, if this passes, twice in a year for eligibility, as opposed to just once. One mother I talked to said she waited on the phone 3 months to get her daughter certified. Not on the phone for that long, but she was on the phone, and it took 3 months to get her certified. So the question is, can these states administer what Congress is about to pass on to them? So the Senate right now is going to basically jam this down the House's throat. We've seen that many times before. But after that, red states and blue states are about to get a huge piece of legislation that they're going to have to deal with. And there are many Republican governors as well who are very concerned about how this will happen.
So let's just stay on the Medicaid portion of this, because when it comes to the policy, but also the politics, as you just described, it's perhaps the most potent part of this very, very, very big bill. Let's listen to what the president himself said when asked about his promise that it's, quote, waste, fraud, and abuse only.
Medicaid is in big trouble with the Democrats.
So you can promise anyone who loses their health care coverage that is because of waste, fraud, and abuse?
Waste, fraud, only waste, fraud, and abuse, which is what everybody wants.
And Olivia, the Congressional Budget Office, which I know some conservatives question, dismiss it, but it is the best thing we've got in terms of a real look at the nuts and bolts of what these pieces of legislation will do. That's true for Democratic Congresses and presidents and Republicans. They say that this bill, 11.8 million people will lose health insurance by 2034. And that is because when we say health insurance, those are the people who get their health insurance through Medicaid.
Yep. And this issue has been so politically charged from the beginning. Trump and other Republicans can definitely use a wide description of what they consider under the umbrella of waste, fraud, and abuse. But you heard centrists complaining about it. They think, okay, if we do work requirements, if we do a few of these other changes in what they call guardrails, we can argue back home that this will be okay. But there is definitely some concern, and it's growing. You're seeing the Democratic ads that are building and attacking Republicans who even voted to just get out of the House, get it out of the Senate. And this will be what we're seeing playing out in the midterms as one of the biggest issues that Democrats campaign on. We will see if Republicans, some of the centrists, David Valadao and others, vote to back it in the House now that they're seeing what they complain is steeper cuts to it in the Senate version. Speaker Johnson barely got it through by just one vote some weeks ago with Republicans by pulling together the two different factions.
But the pressure is quite different when it's just the bill and then you're in between the bill and what the president wants more than anything legislatively becoming law if you're a Republican.